Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate Mogul MD. As you know, my name is Bob Bosick. I'm a retired C-suite executive, and I have the privilege of speaking with medical professionals and/or high-income earners and investors. We're not here to share the real world journeys of what not to do as much as we are the to-dos, but the not to-dos have some valuable lessons as well. Today, I'm excited to bring on board for us Mark Zupo, who has just quite a remarkable story of resilience, quite a journey that I think is important for people to hear, and it's quite inspirational. But he has quite a remarkable background with investing, with digital business and education. He's always thinking, finding problems, and overcoming challenges. And I'm just exceedingly excited to have you on board today, Mark. And I thought that perhaps, I've talked quite a bit here for a second or two about your remarkable story, but nobody else right off the bat is going to know that. And so I would like it if you could just kind of take us at some starting point that you think is germane and walk us through your journey, your arc, your career arc, and how you got to where you are today. So if you take a few minutes, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm thrilled to be here. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story and everybody has something to say. And I've never met anyone who I didn't learn something from when I heard their story. So I'm thrilled to share mine as well. Briefly, I'll make this as concise as I can to give you 50 some years of experience, education and experience. But when I was younger, I was kind of a bad boy. I didn't listen to anybody. I left home when I was 17. I did my own thing. I moved as far away as I could get and learned almost everything the hard way, which is something I teach people now. Don't do it the hard way. Listen to somebody who's done it before and then learn from it. But I had a pretty fair childhood. I was on my own very early, made a lot of mistakes. And the one thing that I knew and have known since day one is that I was always destined to be an entrepreneur. That was my life, and it was going to be my life, and I was going to make that my life. And it worked out pretty well for about the first 30 years or so. Then I had a beautiful family. I was married, a wonderful wife who was a model, just treated me like a king, and had two fantastic children. And tragedy struck in when my son was 16 and I lost him in a car accident. And I just extracted myself from society. I became depressed, and it was really a tremendously overwhelming situation. And I wouldn't ever wish that on anyone else, but it's very difficult to describe what you go through losing a child. As bad as that was, and somewhat depressed, a few years later, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And on the day she was diagnosed, it was a death sentence, unfortunately. It was a very rare form of cancer, untreatable, incurable, and virtually nothing that could be done. Fortunately, I had done very well in real estate, learning real estate from the very start. And to be truthful, and this is verifiable, I had $3 million cash in the bank, had an airplane, had cars, multiple homes, everything that a guy could want, to be honest with you. And it was fortunate that I had resources when my wife got sick, because I was able to spend as much as I needed to try and save her. And unfortunately, the result was that she passed. But not having those resources would have lengthened the amount of time that she suffered with the disease. Shortly after my wife passed was 2007. And we all know what happened in 2007. The unfortunate situation was fortunate and unfortunate. I've done very well in real estate. I've made plenty, and gratefully so. But in 2007, when the mortgage crisis happened and the real estate bubble burst, because everything that I was invested in was real estate, it went away.
You didn't have the diversification that you now would prefer.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that I've done, in fact, I used to tell people when they say, what do you do? I used to say, I do everything real estate. Name it, I'm involved in it in one way or another. And it treated me well. In 2007, it all went away. And I'm not kidding you. In almost 90 days, I went from being widowed, bankrupt, foreclosed. I had 11 foreclosures. Widowed, bankrupt, foreclosed, unemployed, unemployable.
No credit,
no nothing, and clinically depressed. I had to seek help and started taking medicine as fast as I could get it. I don't believe in quitting. I never quit. I don't care what the circumstance is, and I teach other people never quit.
So let's just stop there for a second, because a discussion about resilience is in order here. There's not many people that can visualize and put themselves in the position you've described, myself included, that would have any more energy left, that would probably tap them out. And it's the personal as well. Last month I was in New Orleans, and I was sitting in a room full of people, and virtually everybody was a multimillionaire. And on a professional level, I don't think that there was one, and they weren't all physicians, or there was a varied background of businessmen with varied interests and got there in different ways. And on a professional level, I don't think there was one that didn't describe perseverance and an emotional and intestinal fortitude to overcome at least 4 terminations. These are very successful people, but along their journey, they all described 3, 4, 5 firings that took place. We're talking engineers, doctors. These are smart people, and they're humbly describing getting fired over and over and over before they make it through and figured out what they were doing. But none of them had the additional burden of the personal tragedies that were going on. And I'm just curious, how did you, I understand medicine helps, better living through medicine, I guess. But
it did at the time.
Where was it? Family? Was it a spiritual resource or reservoir you tapped in? How did you come through this?
Well, interestingly, when you're clinically depressed, one of the stages is anger, and anger can do a number of things. It can either, drag you down,
or motivate you.
That's exactly right. It can do one of the two, and I chose the latter. I have a passion for aviation, and that's why I owned an airplane. And I am a master flight instructor. I don't teach anymore, but aviation was one of the things that helped me through that, believe it or not, because in aviation training, it's all about being commanding, leadership, the ability to teach other people how to do something. And it gave me an outlet, even though I couldn't afford it anymore, through friends and so forth. It gave me an outlet to divert my attention away from bad things.
Did you even have, when we talk about clinical depression, one of the things that manifests is, just this perpetual exhaustion. Don't want to get out of bed, don't want to leave the house, don't want to do anything. That was enough to drive you out of bed, out of the house, that interest to get you out. Yes,
it helped considerably. Not to add to it, but I forgot to tell you that I had Crohn's disease as well.
Oh my goodness gracious. Man, whenever I think I'm having it rough, I'm going to remember this discussion. Good Lord. All right.
In fact, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow to talk about that too. But anyway, so there's as I mentioned, I had 2 children, and I have a daughter as well who just turned 40, as a matter of fact. And my daughter was the light of my life at the time. And truthfully, were it not for her existence, I might have turned out to be somebody very different.
Right.
But
that wasn't an option with a child in your life.
No, she was young, and I just started college when my wife passed. So I had some real responsibilities and had to remain accountable as a father. So those few things, when you shove everything else aside, you go, look, I've got somebody who's depending on me, somebody I'm accountable to, and there's no reason and no opportunity to quit, period. You just have to do what you have to do. And
Mark, your audio is going in and out a little bit here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go. That's okay.
Okay.
Better. Yeah.
So with that said, you work at it a little time. Well, here's something interesting. As I mentioned, I was unemployable when I was giving you the list of things that were bad. When you work for yourself your entire life, you don't have a resume.
Right.
And people don't want to hire you because you have no background. They can't verify anything.
Right.
So the interesting thing was, without a resume, I had to build a resume, and I built one. And I built one, and I call it my failure resume, because I had to list all the things that had gone wrong. As you said, everyone you were with at that function could give you a handful of rejections all through their life to build themselves as entrepreneurs or successful people, and they have to experience that. And when I looked at that list and I went, this is miserable, I can't even build a resume, I decided to go back to school, and I got a bachelor's degree at 45.
Good for you.
And then I found that I loved education, and it was a good reason not to have to work. So I went back full time and got a master's degree and then a PhD after that. And the caveat is, it took like 9 years to do. I built a resume of education for 9 years, but then you kind of age out. People don't want you because you get a little old.
Sure. Yeah. They want that upside of a 30-year-old,
But it gives you opportunity to grow and think and build. And as I said, real estate treated me very well before all that happened. So there was no question I would have had to go back into real estate one way or another. I reinstated my real estate agent license, and then decided to become a broker as well, to lead other people through real estate investments and so forth. And I can only tell you that real estate it's foundational. It will always be there. And anybody can make a decent living in real estate if they know how to do it. And what I teach is real estate business. So as opposed to most agents being hobbyists in real estate, I call them hobbyists, is I teach them how to build real estate businesses. And once they learn how to build it as a business and make it a primary source of income, then all kind of great things happen.
Yeah, agreed. What you've also written some books. Yes. You're involved in digital elements and aspects. And why don't you share a little bit about some of the books that you've written?
Certainly, thanks. One of my first forays into book writing was shortly after my son died, and then right after my wife passed. You go through that stage of anger. So the first one I wrote was called Adversity University. And it was a very angry book.
Yes.
It's not a good read, but if you want to hear somebody vent, this is the book to read.
Gotcha.
But as I started to progress in business, I changed my tone a little bit, and I wanted to be teaching. So I wrote a couple other books, one called The Math of Success, and another one called Multiple Streams Mastery. And The Math of Success is really a foundational book about how to achieve a goal by making a plan, working the plan, and using very simple math. If you do this plus this, it equals this. And they're in the book, The Math of Success. Secondarily, Multiple Streams Mastery was born because, as I said earlier, Everything I had was tied up in real estate. It was my primary and sole source of income. When that one thing goes away, when real estate goes away, then you're left unemployed, unemployable, bankrupt, and foreclosed, and what else not. So I help to teach people how to build one or more than one source of income so that if any one goes away, you can survive on the other one, two, or three more. And that's where the books come in. To date, I've written 23 books. None of them angry as the first one.
Wow, 23 books. That's incredible.
Well, thanks. It's not as difficult to process as you think it is. And again, my books aren't the kind you read with a cup of coffee and a dim light at night. They're pretty direct, and I'm a direct individual.
Yeah.
I have a program called the Mean Mentor. And what the Mean Mentor is it's a no fail, no quit, unapologetic point of view to accomplishing anything you want, with the force of your energy behind it. And once you learn how to do that, I tell people all the time, and I don't mean this to sound arrogant, there isn't anything that somebody else hasn't done that I can't do too.
Yeah. I often tell, I have been told in my previous business life that I am very direct. But I felt an obligation to tell people when I was coming up to become an executive, and then when I became an executive, both up and down, whichever way I had to manage, my responsibility, and I felt it a responsibility, and it's about ownership, taking ownership of what you're doing. My job, if you're uncomfortable, that's your problem that you're uncomfortable with what I'm sharing, because my responsibility that I feel I owe you is to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Right. And people want to hear what they want to hear because it's a place of comfort and it's in their lane and it's not challenging or thought provoking or require introspection or any of that kind of stuff. I hope I'm as good at receiving that practice as I am at giving it. And I think I am. But, we all get a little defensive at times. But yeah, it's really important to just be direct, honest, and tell people what they need to hear. And sometimes that cuts a little bit. But if they're going to grow and you have the wisdom of experience or time and age, and you're talking to someone else that doesn't have those things, if I'm not going to do that, it's just a waste of time, right? It's just platitudes that we're having a discussion about.
Everybody likes to feel good, and they want to be made to feel good by hearing good things from other people.
Yeah.
But I tell my students, I'm not your mother.
There you go.
I tell my students, I'm not your mother. I'm not going to tell you to pick up your clothes, brush your teeth, and do your homework. I'll tell you to do it the first time, and then it's up to you to do it after that. Period.
I've often used that one as well. I'm not here. I use this as an example. I used to tell them if it was, young people or employees or whatever, I'm willing to work with you on competency issues. If you need to be trained up, if you need to be taught, if you need to be educated, and you have a competency issue, I'm your helper, right? But I'm not here to train you on commitment issues. That was your mom and dad's job, to teach you how to show up to work on time, how to do what you're supposed to do, how to excel. I don't train or teach or work with commitment. I work with competency issues.
There's, one of the things that I gleaned from my aviation career, and I was commercial pilot, corporate pilot for 20 some years as well.
Oh, okay.
In fact, that's what we're having the real estate business allows me to do. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't mean you just have to do real estate, but if you do real estate the way I show you, then it can give you time to do the things you want to do. And flying is a passion of mine.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I learned in all my aviation training was not only to speak the language, just like real estate has a language, aviation has a language, but it taught me to learn how to listen. And when you listen to people, you learn a whole lot about them and about their story. And it helps you to develop your process to help them.
Yeah.
And I think Zig Ziglar once said, you help enough people get what they want, then you'll always get what you want. And so I turned some of my adversities into a willingness to help other people and be a resource for other people. And I don't charge.
Surprisingly, it comes back.
Man, it does. And you don't have to expect it. It just happens. Simply.
Yeah. So tell me, how does a 17-year-old who heads off into the world, which sounds eerily familiar to me as a young man who headed off without even telling his family that he had joined the Navy and was then later calling them from Scotland off of a submarine to let them know that I was off and gone. Not because I had a bad childhood. I was just that obnoxious, young, belligerent kid at 17 who's going to do stuff my way. In fact, I had a wonderful, my mother was a teacher. My father was a doctor. So I did not have a childhood that was wanting. And yet, I was this obstinate, belligerent, and kind of a little angry for Lord knows what reason.
All kids are angry about something.
What was I bad about? But I was bad about something. In any event, I didn't have that direction. The reason I went into the Navy is I just knew I needed to breathe. I needed to breathe my own air. I needed to be my own man. And off I went. But I, at 17, didn't know. And I thought I heard you describe, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always knew that real estate was an area of interest for me. How did that come about? What piqued your interest, and how did you come to those conclusions?
There was a man, I think he's deceased now. His name was Mark O. Haraldson. And the O, I think, was Oliver, was his middle name, Mark Oliver Haraldson. He wrote a book. He was one of the very first real estate moguls, or what do you call them? The kind of person you look up to in a kind
of mentor.
Mentor, yeah. And there weren't infomercials back then. There wasn't webinars or anything like that. In fact, that was before cell phones. He
Not before telephones, but before
cell phones. I'm not quite that old.
No, but we are old enough to remember the group line where you could hear people talking.
Yes. We had one of those. I grew up on a farm.
Of course.
He wrote a book, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically investing in real estate. How to make $1 million investing in real estate, I think.
And how old were you when you read it?
I was 18 when I read that. I just turned 18.
And you're living on your own?
I'm on my own. I was living on many couches.
A couch surfer.
All up the Florida coast.
Gotcha.
But so I was reading the book, but I picked up the book in a real estate office by accident. It was absolutely by accident, because I was looking for a place to rent, an apartment to rent. And the book was sitting on the table. I picked it up and I read it. And a young guy, I want to say he was around 25, 26 years old, came out from behind the counter, and we started up a conversation. He said, "Would you like to learn how to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I said straight up, "I'm broke.
Right.
I have nothing. So if you're going to teach me, and I'll find a way to pay you afterwards."
Yeah.
And his name was Jerry, and that's exactly what he did. In about 6 months from my first contact with Jerry, I had closed on a house in Fort Lauderdale for $60,000. And listen to this. This was when no money down purchases for real estate started. Okay, 1975 that was. I purchased a home for $60,000, a home with no credit, no income, no job. And I walked away from the table with a $10,000 check.
You're like, this is for me. I'm hooked.
It was rehab money. I don't even know how he did it. I was old enough to sign by myself because I was 18 years old.
Sure.
And I signed on the dotted line, and I took that check, and I stared at that check for hours.
Right? I mean, money is raining from heaven. It's manna. This is unbelievable. Why doesn't everybody do this?
All I could think of is, why would anybody give me $10,000? So I put the money in the bank and I learned how to rehab houses.
Gotcha.
For myself, a little bit at a time.
Very, very good.
And from that, it was just born from that. I just kept buying houses.
So, you were wildly successful up until we started experiencing a string of unfortunate events that seemingly began just before '07, and we all financially watched our portfolio of in 401s, et cetera, go down in the real estate market. But even though you were wildly successful, beyond learning the concept, I need to diversify. As great as real estate is, it needs to be one stream of income. What would you tell the 30-year-old version of yourself from the lessons you've learned and the experiences that you've had and the obstacles that you've overcome? What would you be telling the 30-year-old self that was still on a trajectory of just tremendous success and happiness, right? It's not so much the financial learnings, but what other learnings were there that you could share?
Boy, I wish I could talk to myself again back when I was 18.
Yeah, right.
I've written that letter to myself many times.
Yeah.
The first one is success is achievable. Absolutely achievable for anybody, no matter what you think of yourself or what you think somebody else thinks of yourself. You have to believe it. Number two, if you cover your face right now and stop the oxygen from going into your lungs, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to die,
You're going to fight.
You're going to fight and find a way to breathe.
Yep.
If you want success, absolute success, it's as simple as this. You fight for it like it's air to breathe. And if you don't get it, you're not going to survive. You have to believe in yourself to that nth degree. You have to want it like you want air to breathe. Number three.
I say it's slightly different. In my career was built over 30 years in business, and I had a fast trajectory in each of my roles going up. I became a very successful C-level executive at a fairly young age. And people would ask me, like, how do you do it? And I said, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I really mean this. And it's about ownership. So when I'm running a business unit, or I then become a regional overseeing multiple, or a divisional, or a C-level executive, every step of the way, even though I don't own the company, I am owning it and thinking about it as though my house's equity and my credit cards depend upon it and are funding it. And I allow that thinking and decision-making process drive my behaviors and my attention to detail and the minutia, which it would be if it was mine, right? And it's about that breathing and it's about that ownership. And I think we're saying the same thing, but different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my daughter was that for me after a couple of tragedies and losing everything. And that was my reason at the time. And that got me to a point where I could think clearly and plan and then work a plan.
Yeah.
And the number three thing on my list is, in order to become an expert at something, I promise you this, if you read 20 real books on that subject, you know more than 99% of the people on the planet about that subject. And that qualifies you to be an expert in my book.
It's true.
Simply put. So my third stage was, you find successful people. Look, if you hang around with turkeys, you're going to be a turkey. And that's what happened to me when I was very young, sleeping on everybody else's couch. I hung around with turkeys. I learned a lot, but if you hang around with turkeys, that's what happens. So the third stage is, you find successful people and you latch onto them until they get sick of you. Until they tell you, get out of my face, go away and do this for yourself, or finally, I'll show you how to do it. Just go do it for yourself. And you learn from successful people. Emulation is the best form of flattery that you can have, when you follow people and tell them, I'm following you because I know you're the expert and you're the voice in this realm. I want to know everything you know.
That was the one thing I probably did well as a young person, despite being such an angry little, and you know what, when I was in my early 20s and in my teens, was I don't think probably from the age of 25, 26, or 27 that I had any friends that weren't 20 years my senior. I mean, and it wasn't by design. It just was who I enjoyed being around, because I had this thirst to just satiate myself with their knowledge and their wisdom and their experiences. And I just enjoyed being around people that looked gray like I look right now, right? And I was telling I do some mentoring for young business folks, and one of them recently, I was telling them just that experience is that, he was talking about, getting engaged with other people the same age and et cetera. And I said, I personally never apologized for not having friends of the same age. And I enjoyed them. I was just wired a little more in the ways that I've described. I was immature and not thoughtful. In this way, I was mature and a little more thoughtful about wanting to be around people of interest to me. And they were all older for whatever reason. And that goes to what you're saying as well.
Well, we're drawn towards experience and success, and that's what happens. There's a scene in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street when, and I'm sorry, I cannot think of their names, but the kid who played the Wolf of Wall Street, he had just gotten a new job selling stock, I think, and he was sitting in the booth in a restaurant, and the other young guy approaches him because the car that the wolf was driving was like a spectacular car, and so he says, "What do you do?" As he's standing over him as the Wolf of Wall Street sitting in the booth, and he says, "Well, what do you do? How can you afford a car like that?" And he says, "I sell stocks," and he said, "Well, how much do you earn to be able to afford a car like that?" And he said, "Well, 70,000." So he says, 70,000 a year. He said, "No, it was today." and he says, "Prove it." And the wolf pulls a check out of his pocket and shows him a check, looking up at him. And the guy takes it and holds it. It was a $70,000 commission check that he made that day.
Yep.
And he says, "Well, how can I do that?" And just like you and I both asked everybody who knows more than you, tell me how to do that. I want to know how to do that. And he says, "I'll show you how to do that." He says, "You show me how to do that right now, and I'll quit my job and come work for you." And of course, I can't think of the actor who played the Wolf of Wall Street, but anyway, he says, "Like, really?" He picks the guy picks the phone up, calls his boss. He says, "Hey, Bob." He goes, "Yeah, this is Mike. I quit." Hangs the phone up, and immediately he goes to the guy that plays the Wolf of Wall Street. Says, "Okay, can we start today?" and that typifies my thinking, my line of thinking, my intent, my purpose with everybody that I've met, that I sucked every bit of information out of that I could, so that I could do the same thing. And believe me, I've been to every real estate seminar that's ever existed, whether I signed up or not. And I did take a couple of courses, and I did a few things that helped me, but I learned some invaluable lessons that nobody could ever take that away from me.
What are some ways that you're invested in real estate now?
Duplexes in Florida.
Where in Florida?
Fort Lauderdale, the East Coast, mostly. The face of that has changed a little bit since the last couple of hurricanes and so forth. Insurance.
And you're from Florida originally?
Pittsburgh. Yeah, remember I said I moved as far away as I could go. I left.
Yes, gotcha.
Went to Key West.
My dad's down in the Keys. He's at mile marker 20.
Oh yeah. I've lived on couches from Isla Mirada in the Keys all the way up to the Palm Beaches.
I'm actually talking to you in Tampa today.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Well, good for you.
So you have duplexes, single family residential that you
Single
own?
family. Yeah, I moved to Georgia. I'm just outside of Atlanta now, and I moved to Georgia in '87, and I immediately started investing in single family homes. Here, you could get back then in '87 a 3-bedroom, 2-bath for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, and immediately rentable or flippable, one or the other. And back then, there was a huge cadre of homes that you could flip almost immediately. Not so much now. Many people have taken courses and they're sucking up those good buys, but they still exist. So rehabbing homes and the quadruplex and a few other things like that.
How many single family do you own now?
6. I have 6 now. Yeah, but here's the key. They're paid for.
Yes, exactly.
So 100% of everything.
You got passive income and put some renters in there, and that's nice that's working for you. Very interesting. Let me. I know time is important here, so I don't want to monopolize your morning any more than I'm already doing. But you're a fascinating interview and a terrific person to talk about, and just you're inspiring. Quite candidly, I'm inspired by your fortitude and your perseverance and your entrepreneurship. It's just a fantastic story that you have. Let me ask you one other question before I let you go. Who is someone that the listeners may not know, but they should know? Who is someone that they don't know, but they should?
I have many friends. I have a lot of acquaintances, and to know the difference is important.
Yes,
a lot of acquaintances, but I have a number of friends as well. And there's a specific friend of mine here in Georgia. His name is Eric Anderson. Eric Taylor Anderson. I think Taylor's his middle name.
Okay.
Eric Taylor Anderson. And he teaches speaking for newbies. So he helps people develop their story. In fact, he's done some great work for me. He helps people develop their story. And if for no other reason, because everybody needs to tell their story, it's cathartic in many ways, but he also helps people turn their stories into, we'll say, passive income. And he's helped me for a number of years, just develop specifics of my story to be able to present it to people better.
And it's almost therapeutic in the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the guy. I think his website is erictayloranderson.com. I'm pretty sure.
Thank you. That's terrific. People should know that. If nothing else, if people need to try to figure out how to do an elevator pitch,
absolutely.
Just to have somebody that's got that wisdom and experience.
He's a very honest, genuine guy and willing to help. He gives away more than he charges for, and that's what drew me to him initially. Because when I got in touch with him, I didn't have much of anything left, and but I wanted to tell my story because somebody needed to hear it. But now I tell my story because I wanted to help people. Period. If anything I've said along the way helps you, then man, I feel great about it. And if there's some way that I can help you otherwise,
So where can our listeners find you and your website? You've mentioned some of the books that you've authored, but how can they find and touch you?
There's 2 ways I would say to do it. First, Mark Zupo, MarkZupo.com is the first one. And I'm actually working on my site today, so a couple of links may not work. You can go to Amazon and pick up any one of my books, but I'm going to recommend 2 very specifically.
Okay.
The Math of Success.
Yep.
And Multiple Streams Mastery.
Multiple streams, right?
Multiple Streams Mastery.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And if you go to Amazon and look up Mark Zupo books, they all come up. Okay. But those two specifically, and the reason is this. If for no other reason, if you never call me, if you never go to my website, if you never do anything else, those 2 books will give any reader the support, enthusiasm, and the foundation to tell their story and or build a life business, and you can build a business from your story. Believe me, trust me, I've done it.
And there's 21 others that they can read beyond those two, correct?
Most of them are kind of boring. They're about leadership and all that stuff, but
Leadership's important, right?
yeah, but they're good books. And
Leadership Shadow,
you could read my very angry book, The Adversity.
That's right. If one of our listeners are in an agitated state of mind or in a funk, there's that choice for you as well. Well, I really appreciate it, Mark, you coming on board. As I said, you're incredibly inspiring. I very much enjoy hearing how you overcome. I'm not. I guess I'm. In some ways, I don't want to hear anybody to have had to go through those experiences. But what is inspiring is to hear someone who did. And when you think about and try to put yourself and visualize yourself in that position, you wondered, would you have the fortitude personally to come out the other side of that experience, and or a multitude of experiences back to back to back, when you're just taking body blows, right? It's just body blow after body blow, professionally, personally, and it just knocks the air right out of you. And so to see when we're down that there are those that have had much larger challenges, and not in just one area, but a multitude, and can come out of it, it's inspiring. And I really appreciate the time that you've given us today and shared about your background, et cetera. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Remember, never quit. Believe in yourself unconditionally.
Yep.
And want it like you want air to breathe. to breathe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely.